And I now give the floor to Dr. Danit Mukwege.
Thank you, President of the Council. Secretary General, Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict, representatives of states, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the mission of Vietnam to the United Nations for inviting me to speak today during this open debate on conflict-related sexual violence. 2020 saw the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325 and of the Women, Peace and Security agenda at the Security Council. We welcome the fact that our struggle to support the dignity of women who have survived sexual violence is on the international community's agenda, and that the issue of conflict-related sexual violence is finally gaining visibility amongst decision makers and political representatives. Nevertheless, the progress in international law should not hide the fact that the scourge of sexual violence, which is a real pandemic, continues to prevail in all situations of conflict. In addition, responses remain underfunded, and the climate of impunity for sexual crimes remains more the rule than the exception. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still far away from being able to draw a red line against the use of rape and sexual violence as a strategy of war, domination, and terror. Thus, our fight continues to build a world where every woman and every girl has the right to live a life safe from violence, because the overwhelming majority of victims still do not receive the assistance and the support that they need, nor do they have access to justice and the reparations for the atrocities that they have suffered. The great challenge that we must tackle today is the effective implementation of the existing normative framework, and to make the numerous commitments undertaken by the Security Council into tangible realities to benefit survivors. It is in this context that we welcome the determination of the Secretary General and of his Special Representative to transform these commitments into obligations and these resolutions that have been adopted into results. We took note of this willingness expressed in the various recommendations in the recent report of the Secretary General. The aim is to bridge gaps in the global strategy to fight sexual violence and to implement the measures adopted in the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Amongst these gaps, and the Secretary General comes to the bitter conclusion, and rightly so in his report, that over the first 10 years of the mandate for the Special Representative for Sexual Violence in Conflict, no individual or entity who has perpetrated acts of sexual violence has been targeted by Security Council sanctions because they have committed sexual violence. Thus, we welcome the fact that the Council has imposed sanctions on the head of the armed group 3R, Retour Réclamation Rehabilitation, in the Central African Republic. This was in August 2020. This is because the head of this group planned, ordered, or committed acts of sexual violence, including rape. We do hope that this important precedent will not be a one-off, because everyone here can recognize that the efforts of accountability and justice are the best tools for prevention. So while these odious crimes are not punished and sanctioned, they will continue. However, it is the weak link in all strategies that seek to respond to sexual violence and to discourage potential perpetrators and their chains of political and military command from committing these barbarous acts, which bring shame on our shared sense of humanity. I thus reiterate my appeal to the international community and to states to draw a red line against the use of rape and sexual violence as a weapon of war. A red line would be synonymous with blacklists, with economic, financial, and political sanctions, as well as judicial prosecutions against those perpetrators and instigators of these odious crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, we are continuing here at the Panzi Hospital, where I am at the moment. We're continuing our efforts to respond to the sexual violence, the conflict-related sexual violence, and we have a holistic assistance model which is based on 4 pillars. These are medical, psychological, socioeconomic, and legal. This one-stop centre model is focused on survivors, and the aim is to bring together in one place all of the support for women's health that we can provide. So within a system, within a primary healthcare system, this is to avoid discrimination and stigmatization. But this is only responding to the consequences of violence. First and foremost, we must prevent these crimes from being committed again. And this is done through strengthening our efforts against impunity. Victims not only do have the right to holistic, good quality care, but they also have a right to justice, to truth, and to reparation. Various Security Council resolutions have shed light on the fact that impunity that alleged perpetrators of these gravest crimes enjoy has and remains one of the main obstacles to establishing peace and stability in the DRC. And it explains to a great extent how the perpetration of mass atrocities convinces so far in the provinces in the east of the country, particularly in Ituri and in the Kivu. This is the reason behind our advocacy efforts to implement the recommendations of the mapping report on the gravest violations of human rights and humanitarian law committed in the DRC between 1993 and 2003. This is one of the darkest periods in the contemporary history of the country. Then women and young girls paid a heavy price, and then all fighting forces, both Congolese and foreign, used mass and systematic rape and sexual violence as a strategy to sow terror and subjugation. However, more than 10 years after its publication by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, none of the recommendations in this report, which seek to establish all tools for transitional justice, has been implemented. And this is particularly shocking given the breadth and the gravity of the crimes that have been committed against civilians for decades, and these crimes are continuing to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, we wish to draw the attention of the members of the Security Council to the fact that political and military solutions have so far failed to bring stability to the DRC, and they have failed to ensure the protection of civilians. While the Congolese Authority and the United Nations have begun discussions on a strategy for a gradual withdrawal, a progressive withdrawal of MONUSCO, it is vital, in our view, to put the fight against impunity as well as the use of all mechanisms for transitional justice at the heart of this strategy. This is done by focusing on the need to prioritize far-reaching security sector reform and judicial prosecutions through the implementation of international or internationalized mechanisms to prosecute and to try these gravest of crimes. I would like to thank you for the actions that you are going to take to put an end to impunity and to support the implementation of a holistic strategy for transitional justice in the DRC. This need for justice is a vital prerequisite to break the cycle of violence and instability. It is a sine qua non in order to make progress towards sustainable development and peace. Together, we can put an end to sexual violence, and we can act for human dignity, for justice, and for peace. I thank you very much.
I thank Dr. Mukwege for his briefing.